Hey, how's it going? Well, I have to say that I've been giving this grief series quite a bit of thought in how I was going to end the series with um, number five. Uh, Episode number four was more of a music ditty. I wanted to show you guys how I dealt with my own anticipatory grief. That's a real thing, anticipatory grief. And the way I dealt with it was through music. And that's why I posted what I did in episode number four as I was dealing with my dad's anticipated passing. It helped me out a great deal. My mom was quite different, though, because being her 24/7 caregiver brought in a whole different spectrum of things for me to consider and deal with. So I didn't really get an opportunity to do what I was doing because dad was more independent. I had help. Deborah was with me. Um, and with my mom, it was more of a private thing in regards to I played music for her live. Dad, I would kind of mess around with him here and there, but um, I I played music for mom. She was in a whole different type of illness situation, and it was just easier. And I think she appreciated more the time that we spent together. This time around, I decided to impart a little bit of something of myself. I contemplated heavily whether I wanted to go in this direction. And I decided, yeah, you know what? Because I have been dealing with grief longer than I realized because I stuffed it a little bit. But it has to do with personal loss that I experienced back in 1983. This entire series and this channel has focused on caregiving with my parents and a journey as a caregiver. However, this episode is going to be different because I'm going to throw myself into the make. More or less how I dealt with grief. You know, a lot of times I mention my past and it's not great. And I admit that a lot of the times that I have been dealing with certain things, it's because of choices that I made, decisions that I made, actions that I chose. Sometimes we are our worst enemies, right? And I can only tell you what I know of for myself. Um, I've mentioned in other videos that I'm not going to make any excuses. I'm not going to make any political statements, but it has to deal with something that's very, very much on the minds of people. Um, and I have mentioned in the past, I'll keep my political opinions to myself. I really have no room to speak when it comes to that. But I've mentioned in the past that I've never had children. Um, and I've never experienced childbirth. However, I have been pregnant. It was a very personal decision. I can't justify anything, and I won't go there, but I think you understand what I'm saying. If you don't, put it on pause, play it back, and hear my words again, because I don't really want to talk about that part. But my reasons were mainly driven by low self esteem and low self worth. And I didn't believe in myself that I could do what needed to be done to be a good mom. And a lot of times I mentioned that I had a rocky relationship with my mom. And that was always weighing on me, if that makes sense. But, ironically, when I found out that I was pregnant, uh, my boyfriend at the time was not really emotionally there for me. When we were young, we weren't that young, but we were young. And the weird thing is, I went to my mom to seek advice. I went to my mom, ironically, to seek comfort and security, and actually have someone in my corner to say, you can do this. Because when I found out I was pregnant, I immediately fell in love with someone that I didn't even know. And my first thought was, I'm responsible for this person because that's who I am and that's what I thought. I immediately fell in love with this human being. My mom didn't give me what I was looking for. My mom, without, I'm not here to bash her. I'm here to say that it may explain further why we became estranged and why after I made my decision and I sought her support and realizing that she wasn't there for me the way I had anticipated. I can't take it back, but I panicked. And I ended up panicking and making a decision that no one, not even my mom, is responsible for. However, I did spend years upon years upon years putting the blame on her and feeling like she failed me as a mom and all these other things that would explain why we had such a love hate relationship that I mention all the time. And after I made my choice and I carried out the task, I was riddled with regret and guilt. It was immediately and it was intense because, again, I will say, I fell in love with this human being that God had blessed me with. Deep down, I knew inside, but I still did the unthinkable, my unthinkable. I'm not speaking on behalf of anyone else. I am responsible for my choices. And some people may say, hey, it's not a big deal. Well, it is a big deal to me. But the point is I still carried it out. I went through so much pain and anguish over this decision. Nobody talks about what happens afterwards because your body is physiologically still going through a pregnancy. When you interrupt something like that, your body only understands what it understands, not when it's manipulated. And the mental thing that it did to me, I'm not speaking for anyone else. I'm only telling you what I went through. That if I could ever help someone to understand what it's like with the after effect of what could have been, your body, your mind, everything, I literally hated myself. Because remember, the second I found out that I was pregnant, I fell in love with this child. But I didn't have my self-worth, my confidence in myself that I could do this. And when I went to my mom, she didn't support me in a way that I thought she would have, should have. She didn't. You know, the guilt and the regret were so awful that I regretted this irreversible loss so much that I chose to abuse myself. I punished myself with drugs, alcohol, and heavy promiscuity. I wanted to hurt myself in ways with unforgiveness. I went through 10 years of self disrespect. I was disgusted with myself. I couldn't get past it. My grief was so intense, and yet I did it to myself. 10 years. I won't even get into the details of it, but some tragic things happened in my life that caused me to go into rehab. And when I went into rehab, I got cleaned up and I sobered up from my life of self-abuse, self-punishment, self-hatred. I packed up my bags and I moved to Chicago, Illinois. Somehow, some way, I found a relationship with Jesus Christ through a 12-step program. And I've made comments about that because I knew whatever I was doing was not working. And I was so beaten up by myself and by others. And I just couldn't live with myself and my decision. What had been done was done. And I threw myself into anything that was negative. And I threw myself into a relationship with the Lord and asked for his forgiveness. But I didn't ask for forgiveness of how I threw all the blame at my mom. I just wanted relief. And so I did that. I went someplace that nobody knew me and I could start my life over again, make myself clean, threw myself into church, discovered I loved the microphone, discovered how much music was my future, among other things like broadcasting and things like that. And I'll never forget it. One day I was in my apartment in Schaumburg, Illinois, and I was listening to Focus on the Family, a Christian radio program. And I was laying on my couch just listening to this. And I'd listen to it occasionally here and there. Focus on the Family. And the host said, there is a story that I want to introduce you to. And the author is here in studio with us, blah, 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 blah. Right. And I'm like, oh, what's this about? And I'm literally just laying there. I think I was sick because I was home, or unless it was a weekend. I have no idea. I can't remember that part. But it was like a radio play, like a radio drama. And it was entitled Tilly. And honestly, the synopsis was of this person describing what it's like to be in heaven and what they saw. And they just saw countless numbers of children in a playground just playing. Bunch of children, but there were no parents. And this narrator was saying, it's so strange. Where are all these children? And they all look happy. They look well taken care of, but there's no adults here. And they go on to describe this scenario. And the kids were all playing, and then all of a sudden someone says, he's coming, he's coming. And all the kids were whispering to each other, and you could tell there was excitement in the air, and they were like, he's coming, he's coming. And the question is, who's coming? Jesus. Jesus is coming. He takes care of us. We love when he's here, the narrator was saying. And you're like going, what? Because they're describing this playground with all these kids. And then all of a sudden, this thought comes in your mind, Jesus. And in that moment, in this audio play, this woman describes this child that comes up to her and says, hi, my name's Tilly. And she goes, hello. I want you to know that I forgive you. And this woman goes, forgive me. She goes, well, yeah, you don't know who I am, but I know you're my mom. But it's okay because I'm here with all the other children. And I'm waiting for you when it's your time to come here permanently. But Jesus is going to take care of us in the meantime. And this woman all of a sudden wakes up from a dream. And I remember listening to this play and just sobbing. Because it dawned on me that all these children, something happened to them. They were all there together, waiting for their parents. And that Jesus had them and was taking care of them and loving them. And I sobbed and I wept. And I thought, that's where my kid is. Of course, I don't know the gender of my child, but I'm convinced that God has a sense of humor and that he would bless me with a daughter that would be just like me and drive me up the wall. So I believe that my daughter is being well taken care of. And I realized I never forgave myself. I asked God for forgiveness, but I never forgave myself all those years. I wanted to hate myself. I wanted to hurt myself. I wanted to do all the things based on that decision. And when I finally asked for forgiveness, I asked God to forgive me, but I never forgave myself. And you know, grief of loss stays with you, and the memories of the pain become less. I ended up forgiving myself. And the weird thing is, that weight was so lifted off my shoulders. And I found myself loving this child that I am not familiar with. But I know that I have a reason to be here, to carry out whatever was set forth for me. I'll never be a mom here on earth. But when my day is up and I am in the presence of the Lord, I know who will greet me. I know that my own child will be welcoming me. When my dad was able to talk before he passed, and we had our moments to talk openly about things, I never talked about the abortion. I never talked about it to him. He loved me no matter what. But we did talk about it openly 30 years after it happened. And I told my dad, I'm so sorry, Dad, that I denied you from becoming a grandparent, at least being a grandparent to my child. I said, but you know what? You're on the precipice of meeting this child, this grandchild. I'm a little jealous. And he lovingly said, it's okay, Carolyn. I go, yeah, but you're gonna meet your grandchild. I did the same thing with my mom. I apologized to her. I apologized to her. I had no right to blame her for a decision that I made and for an action that I did. Yeah, I wanted her to be a mom to me and say, Carolyn, you could do this. I support you in anything that you do, but she didn't say that. Those last moments with my mom where I said, I finally got a mom, we both cried together. I said, you get to do what I told Dad. You get to meet your grandchild, the child that I'm not familiar with, that I will meet later on. My grief was so thick. To this day, every day, I think of this child. I think about how old they would be. I think about how my life would have been so different. It took 30 years for me to talk to my baby daddy boyfriend about it. We hashed out a lot of things and we realized we were both lousy communicators. And today we're good friends. We're really good friends. And every day, every month, and every year, I think of this child. I don't cry as much as before, but I smile because I too one day will be with her. And boy, will I be surprised if it's not a her. This was hard for me to admit. But I focus so much on my mom and dad and what grief is about. I just want you to know that by myself not dealing with the grief or coming to terms with myself, those years of drug abuse and drinking and promiscuity and all that stuff didn't need to be. What did I know? What I knew was I didn't want to be in a relationship with a child like I was with my mom. But it all comes down to communication. We didn't have that. A lot of hurt. My grief was so painful. And I acted it out in so many different ways. And there's times that I should have been dead, that I tried to be dead, and it wouldn't work. It didn't work. Look at me. I'm still here. I'm still freaking here. It doesn't take away what's ahead of me. Because when my day is done, I know at least my family will be waiting for me. And my kid will be there saying, welcome home. That's what I have to look forward to. And I do want the Lord to say, well done, good and faithful servant. Because I'm convinced, even though I wasn't married, even though the Lord blessed me, He had the confidence in me more than I had in myself. He knows exactly who He needs to bless with a child. He knows exactly. So with that being said, I'm going to end things on a positive note. I'm going to play a little clip of a conversation between these two men. And in this conversation, there's a perspective that gets brought up that's very comforting for those of us who are grieving. Think about these words.
Yeah. So when we talk about death, we have to honor it, and then we have to reframe it. If we talk about looking at the birth of a child, we have kids.
Yeah.
You know what it's like to have a kid.
Mm-hmm.
There's that conception, there's the 9 months, there's the getting ready for it, there's the recognizing that we contributed to the process as a man, but that the phenomenal aspect of what a woman does in making a human, and how you're reminded always that they're making a human. Like my wife would tease me all the time. I'd be like, can we do this? She's like, I am making a human. right? So when we look at that, there's an excitement and enthusiasm, and everybody in our circle, our friends and our family, they're all waiting for that big moment. They're waiting for the phone call. They're excited. But when that baby comes into the world, that is a traumatic experience for that child. It is leaving a place of comfort, of nurturing, of security, and it's going to go through trauma. But it's going to be met by people and friends who are waiting for them and excited to have them. There is no difference between laboring to come in this world and laboring to leave. We are met by family on both sides. And for anybody who's been touched by COVID and you couldn't be there for somebody when someone passed, remember this: nobody passes alone. You might not, from an ego standpoint, have been able to be there for yourself, to wish them goodbye. You might not have been able to hold them and hug them in the physical. But rest assured that loved ones and friends are there to greet that person as they make that transition. Nobody passes alone.
Okay.
Isn't it something? I've never heard it put that way. Just the thought, the mental picture that he paints, it's true. It's the same coming in. It's the same going out. Your body knows how to break itself down when you're at the end of the line. There's work to be done. And then all of a sudden, your family, your loved ones, they're around you. I just want to tell you, It's going to be okay. And I thank you for listening and staying with me on this because it was hard to admit. It was hard to bring this up. But I'm glad that I was able to share it with you because maybe it'll help someone. I know I have something to look forward to, and I think about it daily. In the meantime, be blessed and remember to always be good to yourself. Take care.